morning, everyone. Tell a story about a guy who walked into a bookstore and he asked the clerk, where is the self-help section? And the clerk said, why are you asking me? Find it yourself. There's a whole section in every bookstore called self-help. But the Torah talks about self-help in this week's parsha. This week's parsha, the Torah says, and it's the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, it's like God's sermon to the Jewish people, this Shabbos. And he says, see, I've placed before you today life and good on the one hand, and death and evil on the other side. And I've commanded you to love Hashem, follow my commandments. And then the famous words, Ubacharta b'chaim, you should choose life and goodness over, God forbid, the opposite. So it's God encouraging and inspiring words before Rosh Hashanah, saying to us, you have two paths, and it's up to you to choose your path. But not only that, the Torah then talks about in this week's parsha, what happens if you chose the wrong path in life? Are you doomed? So the Torah says, this mitzvah of teshuvah, that even if you chose the wrong path. I was once walking by a church, and I saw a big sign outside that said, God allows U-turns. God says if you took the wrong path, it's never too late. You could always make a U-turn and go back. Like your GPS system, when you take the wrong turn, it says recalculating. And it gives you a new route to get to your destination. So God says no matter where you are on the journey of life, no matter what fate brought to you, you could always turn your fate into destiny by rerouting and getting back onto the proper path. And the Torah tells us in this week's parsha that this mitzvah is very close to you. Don't think it's distant. Don't think it's beyond you. It's not in the heavens that you should say, who's going to go to the heavens and fulfill it? It's not over the sea. But rather it is near to you in your mouth, speech, thought, and action. So what could be a more beautiful way to go into Rosh Hashanah than Hashem saying, no matter where you are in the journey of life, you could always come back. And the Talmud tells us a beautiful story. The Talmud says there was a man by the name of Elazar ben Dodaya. The Talmud says this man frequented the houses of ill repute. He was a real womanizer. The Talmud says he had been with every woman, but then he heard about a certain beautiful harlot who was in a very faraway land, and he traveled overseas to get to her, to be with her. And when he was with her, she looked at him and said, you know, Elazar, you're hopeless. You're a goner. You're a lost cause. And she basically said, you're beyond return. Now, when someone of that character tells you that you're in bad shape, you're really in bad shape. And somehow these words struck him. The reprimand from this woman. The Talmud describes how he went into the fields and he sat and he started to weep about his life and the way he led his life. And the Talmud says he turned to the sun and the moon and he said, Bikshol Rachmim, pray for me, ask for mercy on my behalf. And they said to him, we can't help you. And he turned to the stars, he turned to the trees, he turned to everything. And he said, help me, pray for me. And he said, we can't help you. And here's the final words of the story. The Talmud said, he finally looked at himself and he said, Ein hadavar toloi elabi. The matter is completely up to me. It's what I do. And the Talmud says he put his head between his knees and he started to cry. And he cried and he cried and he cried. Ad sheyatze neshmase, till his soul expired from regret and anguish and pain over the way he led his life. And here's the punchline. The Talmud says, when he died, a heavenly voice came out and said, Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya. Suddenly he got the title Rabbi. The gates of heaven are open for you. And the Talmud then goes on to say that when Rabbi, who was the codifier of the Mishnah, Yehuda Nasi, heard the story about Elazar ben Dodaya, he said there are some people who work their whole life to achieve the world to come. And there are those, Yesh Konim Alama, they acquire their world for eternity, V'sha Achas, with one moment. With one act of teshuvah that was so profound and sincere and deep, he transformed his entire life. And the Talmud tells us the story to show us that no matter where you are in the path of life, the gift of teshuvah means you could always come home. And as the story goes of this young boy who always tried to stump his rabbi, and one day he couldn't stump his rabbi, so he came with a butterfly in his hand. And he said, Rabbi, I have a butterfly in my hand. Is it alive or dead? And he figured, listen, if the rabbi says it's dead, he'll release the butterfly and prove the rabbi wrong. The rabbi says the butterfly's alive, he'll give a little squeeze and finished. He'll show the rabbi he's wrong, the butterfly is dead. So he comes to the rabbi with his hands cupped and he says, Rabbi, I have a butterfly in my hand. Is it alive or dead? The rabbi looks at him with a smile and says, Sonny boy, the answer is in your hands. And that's Hashem's message to us before Rosh Hashanah. Where is your life going? Where do you want it to go? It's not up to other forces. It's not the sun and the moon and the stars and the trees. As Elazar ben Dedaya realized, Ein adav v'talei ela bi. It's completely up to me.